that inspires lifelong learners and cultivates caring and productive citizens of our ever-changing world. Our first order of business is roll call. So we can start with Medora.
Medora's Champagne.
Great. Sarah?
Sarah Ward.
Janet?
Shannon Manessa.
Thomas?
Thomas Doyle.
And Ingrid O'Lardy. Jen Wynn is not with us, but is hopefully joining. So first, we'd like to welcome our two newest members to the Norfolk School Committee who were elected during Tuesday's election. We have Sarah Ward and Shannon Manessa. So welcome to the committee and to your first official meeting. Our first order of business tonight is reorganization of the Norfolk School Committee. So I'm going to start by seeking a motion to nominate someone as a chairperson for the school committee. Do we have a motion or nomination?
Assuming he still would like to continue in his role, I nominate Thomas Doyle as the chair of the Norfolk School Committee. Hot potato to you.
All right, do we have a second?
Sure.
So someone has to second my motion, Sarah or Shannon.
Seconded.
There you go.
Any discussion?
Does anybody want to debate Thomas's qualifications?
You can email me later if you want to.
All right.
I wholeheartedly endorse Thomas as the chair of the school committee. That's
My wife has a list of grievances she can go over with you.
All right, so we need all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, great. So then
Thank
I'm going
you.
to turn this meeting over to Thomas, who will take motions for the remaining positions.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So moving on, we need a motion to select a vice chair, and I'm going to go ahead and make a motion for that. I'd like to make a motion to select Medora, passing a hot potato to her, as the vice chair.
Much smaller potato.
All right.
Okay.
So, do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, and following the same process, assuming no further discussion, though it's welcome. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So motion
Okay.
passes 4-0.
All right.
And let me see. Then we skip on to. All right. So then the next one needs a little bit of explanation. Tad, it's technically 3 roles. It's really the middle one is the most pressing, or the most time-consuming, I would suppose. So it is a motion for a person to be secretary, the KP representative, and I'll explain that in a moment, and then the legislative liaison. In all my years on the board, I can't think of times there's been too much involving the legislative liaison, so there's really not much responsibility as far as that goes. The KP representative is a really key position. So for Shannon and Sarah's benefit, I don't know how much you know about this or don't know about this, so stop me. But basically, while Jim Lehan just won the seat to represent the town on the KP school board, we also have a seat at the table as well. And it's very important for us, particularly in all the budget issues we have going on, but just in general, to have an individual that can report back to us as these meetings occur. So it is a separate meeting that would be at KP when they meet. They meet roughly once a month, I believe as well, but sometimes more often. And it's basically just giving us an indication of what issues they're facing, challenges they're facing. A lot of times it's very similar, but sometimes they have some unique issues that we may have to address or start thinking about ourselves. So you'll see in our agenda tonight, I don't think we're going to end up having anything. We have a report, and we do that each meeting where it's a report of the KP school committee as far as what's happened there. So I guess a long-winded way of saying this, would either of you be able to make that, or any of us, I guess, make that time commitment with the understanding that it's definitely going to require additional time beyond just our meetings?
Do you know?
Just jump in and clarify. So the whoever the Norfolk School Committee appoints as the elementary liaison is a full voting member of the KP School Committee.
Yes.
And so it is really critical that somebody's able to attend those meetings. They need a quorum, so they need a certain number of voting reps to count in order to have a quorum. They typically meet, as Thomas said, it's I believe they actually sometimes meet twice a month. It's either once or twice a month.
Yep.
And they do, that person may serve on some subcommittees, but typically they try to limit that because they're also serving on subcommittees for the elementary district.
Do you know what night they usually meet?
Mondays.
Yep.
I believe it's Mondays.
Okay, I probably wouldn't be a good choice then because I have the Friends of the Library meetings on Mondays once a month. Unless they happen to not meet on the first Monday, then I could definitely.
I don't think they're the first Monday. I don't know for certain.
I can double check. I can text Mr. Zine and see if I can get an answer on the meeting dates. Any other questions about the role?
And what we did do last year is, I think we sort of split it. It ended up being split between Paul and Jeff. You can't split it contemporaneously. They want one person to be, like, you couldn't be, someone goes to the first meeting and someone goes to the second meeting, unfortunately. But I think it was Paul Cochran was initially the KP rep, and then he had a change in his work situation, like he just couldn't make the commitment, and so I think Jeff ended up taking up the mantle. So it's, I think there's the ability to, nobody's trying to create a insurmountable goal for anybody if it turns out to be untenable for schedules or something like that. I mean, it's a great opportunity, but it is a big commitment. Or a bigger commitment, I guess.
You haven't joined the Army. If it ends up where it doesn't work out for you, you're allowed to leave it, and that's what we ended up doing last year. That's perfectly fine. I don't know if Ingrid, you heard back from Paul?
Not yet. I sent him a message, but I haven't heard back yet. I'm pretty positive it's Monday night meetings.
I believe that is correct. Sarah, if you're interested, we can always sort of on a provisional basis, if you want to try it out, and if it ends up being a conflict, we can just revisit the issue next meeting again. That's fine.
Sure, yeah. I run night programs for the library too, so I'm usually working like on average 2 nights a week already with my other nights. So I don't know how that would work, but I'm totally willing to take it on.
Okay, no, thank you. Appreciate that.
Awesome.
It is very important. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. If it's something that it just becomes untenable for you, let us know, and then we'll make some additions and changes from there. That's fine.
Okay.
All right. So then we would need a motion to have Sarah serve as or actually, I'll go ahead and make the motion. I'm going to make a motion to nominate Sarah as the secretary / KP representative / legislative liaison.
Seconded.
Okay. I don't know if we have any further discussion beyond what we just did, and seeing no one, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So 5-0.
I apologize for being late, everybody. I haven't used Google. I don't know what happened. Safari blocked me, my kids. I don't know. Sorry.
We talked about you a lot, Jen, but it's okay.
I'm sure I was.
We almost put you in as the KP rep before you.
Yeah, you are
Sarah and Shannon, thank you. I'm sorry, I've been really busy to say, congratulations on your win, but really, thank you. Your valued input. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, and hello. And I just wanted to say, Sarah, if you do try it out, it would be helpful to understand a little bit more about the schedule. But if it doesn't work out, Sarah, I'm happy to help as backup if it comes to that too.
Okay, awesome.
All right. And sorry, guys, I'm just trying to get something opened here.
We then need for plan.
So then our next one, sorry, I got too many windows going on here. So then all right, so I'll make a motion to nominate someone as a recording secretary. And full disclosure, I don't have a clue who served in this role last year.
It's Pam Kinahan.
Oh, it is Pam.
Oh, awesome.
You have to appoint her annually to take minutes for the committee.
I do think of, when I think of Pam, I think of recordings. So it's.
This is Pam Kinahan from the Norfolk Public Schools.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, she even sent me an email that said that too. Oh my! It even had her name.
Yeah.
The information was there. I just blew that. Nothing personal, Pam.
Well, I sent it twice, but that's okay.
Wow. Okay. I guess you're counting. Okay. So now that that's happened, so if someone wants to second that motion, so we can quickly move past this, that'd be great.
I'll second that motion. Yeah.
No further discussion. Pam is eminently qualified for this. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Let me see. Hold on. So then, this is what I was trying to get to.
We have designated bill signers and payroll, and then the two subcommittees.
All right, let's see. So I think the way we've done this the last few years, essentially everyone had the ability to be a bill signer and a payroll signer. Am I correct in that, or am I remembering that incorrectly?
Yes, so we appoint a primary person for each, and then all school committee members can serve as the backup if their primary bill signer can't make it or get in to sign the bill.
I'm happy to continue to serve as the primary signer. We've got a pretty good system going where I'm able to get it scanned over to me and I can scan that right back. And I don't think there's been any issues. And I usually try to let someone know if I'm going to be unavailable to get the information. That way one of the backup folks could get involved, but I'm happy to keep doing that role. If someone else wants to do it, I have no strong preference, but it doesn't matter to me.
You are welcome to maintain that responsibility.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okay, so we can do that. And that does not require a vote. Hold
And then
on.
we need to identify members interested in serving on the budget subcommittee and the policy subcommittee.
Okay, so I'll put this to you, Jen. You want to keep doing budget subcommittee?
I do policy. I would like to continue with policy.
Sorry,
please.
I was looking at Medora and said Jen. Sorry, my fault.
That's okay. Policy, I would love to continue to do that. Please.
All right, so I'll throw that out to Sarah and Shannon, and we can give you more of an explanation to it, but it's somewhat self-explanatory. So it's developing all the policies for the schools. Either of you have interest in serving in that? Typically, what we've done is they meet just prior to our scheduled meeting, so it's not an additional night of meetings. So if we meet at 7, it's 6:30. Am I correct, Jen? Typically
6:15.
6:15. Okay.
Okay. I'd love to be on policy if that's possible.
Okay.
That's great.
All right, so we'll do that. Now I'll actually say Medora's name while looking at her. So Medora, do you want to keep doing budget?
Oh, why stop now?
Keep the fun going?
Yes, sure, that sounds great.
I'm happy to help out with that one too, particularly if Sarah's taking the time commitment as it stands right now for KP, and Shannon's going to be doing the policy. That just makes sense. So if I'm happy to do it that way if we want.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyone would be great, but sure, I see where you're headed with this, and I think that would be great.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's
it.
All of our reorganization, I believe. Okay, so now let's move on to. I am just trying to get to it. Bear with me 1 second here. We have a gift fund. I'm trying to find the exhibit though. Sorry.
Pam, do you have that? Can you read the donations? You're muted though. I'm having.
No, just figured that out. Do you want me to read them or did you find it, Thomas?
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Norfolk PTO $1,600 BOKS kids for HOD. Norfolk PTO $800 chorus stipends HOD. Norfolk PTO 88035 grade 2 alum shirts HOD. And $600 NCL charitable fund curriculum expansion HOD, totaling $3,880.35.
35 cents. Okay, so do we have a motion to accept those gifts as described by Recording Secretary Pam?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, assuming no further discussion beyond a thank you to NCL and the PTO for those generous gifts, much appreciated as always. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. And let's see here. All right, this one I do have. Hold on. So my portion, even there is a resolution that I am going to read that came out. I think a lot of you are aware of this, but it was something from statewide that has been read by all the various school committees, and it just further underlines the importance of funding and how important it is. So if you bear with me a second, I'll read this. This is dated June 25th, 2020. It is to Governor Baker, Secretary of Education, the Senate President, House Speaker. It also copies both U.S. senators as well as our state senator and state representative. And it reads, whereas if schools are to reopen this fall in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is responsibility of each school district to do so safely and responsibly. And whereas it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that each school district is able to pay for the enormous additional staffing, transportation, and material expenses required to do this. And whereas the state cannot expect mandatory COVID-19 safety guidelines to be followed without also ensuring that each school district has the funds required to implement these guidelines. Therefore, let it be resolved that the state must guarantee each school district full reimbursement for whatever COVID-19 expenses are required to follow state mandates. We must ensure a statewide school reopening that is safe, responsible, and equitable. So there's a motion that we'll make to adopt the above resolution regarding full state funding for COVID-19 related expenses. And respectfully, Thomas Doyle, on behalf of Jennifer Wynn, Medora Champagne. That's how it's signed. So sorry, Shannon, you didn't make the letter yet. So
I can add their two names and then
Yeah,
send it
please.
to everybody to sign.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And
So we would be looking for a vote to accept that resolution and send it to the state on behalf of the Norfolk School Committee.
we need well, I made the motion, but yeah, if we just get a second and then get a vote on that, please.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we'll get the Sarah and Shannon's names added to that, and then Pam will get that over to us, and then we'll get that sent out. So thank you for that. And then I believe we're over to Ingrid for the time being, right?
Yep. Before I jump in, we did not pause for public comment. I don't believe there's anybody.
Oh, apologies.
But I just want to jump back if there's anybody that wanted to make public comment. I know we have Roxanne and Trish in the audience, and Tom. We're all good? Okay, all right, great. So I only have 2 items for the school committee tonight. This is typically a meeting that we have back in May, but because of all the delays in elections, we're a little bit behind. So I just wanted to give a quick update as to where we are with the budget, as well as where we are with the reopening. So I'll probably do those in reverse order. The reopening guidelines from the Mass Department of Education were sent out earlier today. They were released by the governor's office this morning at 10 o'clock. And since then, I have also sent them out to all of the parents in the community, as well as to the Norfolk Select Board and Advisory Board. As you probably saw, if you have a chance to look at the guidance, they've been long awaited. We were expecting the guidance to come out initially back in June 15th, but there's been quite a bit of changes recently in public health as well as in the research. So the governor's office was holding that. They've been working with the American Pediatric Association as well as the emergency medical team that's been advising the governor throughout the pandemic and working with the Department of Ed. So because of the new medical information, the guidance was held and delayed and not released until this morning. The positive thing I think that came out with the guidance is that the Department of Education is actively looking to try to return students to in-school learning in the school buildings to the greatest extent possible that is safe for both students and staff in the fall. There is some changing guidelines regarding social distancing for young students based on medical data that is indicating, contrary to what we first believed about COVID, that children are not actually super spreaders of COVID-19. They're actually less likely to catch it, more likely to be asymptomatic, and less likely to spread it. And that is based on international studies that were attached to the guidance that came out this morning. Again, we just got the guidance as well, so I haven't had a chance to read all of the research behind it, but have summaries. Based on that new guidance, we're asked to take a look at our school classrooms and determine how many students we can safely bring in with those social distancing parameters. I think one of the important things that they have stated is that social distancing is not the only precaution that we would be putting in place. We would also be enforcing hand washing, hand sanitizing. Students would be wearing masks, teachers would be wearing protective gear. So all combined with all those provisions in place, the lower distance of 3 feet is reasonable. So we do have a reopening committee. There's 25 members for our reopening committee. So on our reopening committee, we have teachers, we have administrators, we have special education staff, we have parents, we have facilities staff members, we have our 3 school nurses and consult with the Norfolk County Public Health nurse, and we also have our custodial facilities staff. So there's broad representation on the committee. The Department of Ed is requiring districts to put together 3 different plans that we will have to submit to the Department of Ed in early August. The plan that we will be primarily focusing on is a full return of all students in September with additional safety and social distancing guidelines in place. We will have to be looking at limiting the number of students in a classroom, making sure we have sufficient protective gear, limiting motion around the building so students not traveling as much. Lunch would not be served in the cafeteria, it would be served in classrooms. So there's a lot of plan consideration that has to happen now that we actually have the guidance. That will be the primary focus. All districts are also required to develop a comprehensive remote learning plan. We have a remote learning plan that we have implemented over the past few months, but now that we have time, that was implemented in the midst of a crisis and an urgent response. We do have half of our school reopening committee that's going to focus on remote learning and look to see, what did we do well, what did we gather from parent feedback, from surveys that we sent out, what could we do better, are there additional technology resources or programs that we consider purchasing, what professional development do our teachers need, what do we need, what resources and training do we need to provide parents. So they will be building from the base of what we have and developing a more robust and comprehensive remote learning plan that we will also submit to DESE. The reason for that is if there's ever a spike in cases or if we have a student or a staff member that's positive for COVID and we're directed to close, then we would be required to revert to a remote learning plan. So we will be submitting a plan for a full reopening, for a remote learning, and then for a hybrid. The hybrid could be necessary if there's an increase of cases in Massachusetts and they want to go back to a further social distance guideline. So we will have to develop a hybrid model too, where students will spend some time in school and some time in a remote learning setting. So we'll be developing all 3 of those plans. We'll bring them back and share them with the school committee. And we will also have to submit them to the Mass Department of Education in early August. It's our hope that we will be reopening with the first one, which will be the full return of our students with additional safety measures in place. But that being said, Massachusetts is tightly tracking the incidence of cases, hospitalizations, changes in public health data, and we've been advised from the Department of Ed that could change if the public health plan or if new data comes out that would indicate that was not as safe or there were any concerns around that. So we're moving forward with the development of plans. As I said, we do have parent representatives and teachers and staff on those committees. We do anticipate one of the first tasks that committee will be taking on is to send out surveys to families. We will be gathering data. Given the new safety protocols that we will have in place, given the guidance from the Department of Ed, we're going to want to find out from parents if they anticipate that their children will be returning and attending school in person. We want to find out if they're going to be accessing the transportation services that we provide, so that we can better plan for what school is going to look like. Additionally, the Mass Department of Ed announced today, which was great news for our schools, that the state has agreed to dedicate a portion of the federal CARES Act money that was given to the Commonwealth to public education. So, and that will be to help offset COVID-related costs. It looks like it's going to be about $225,000 per student. With the 1,000 students, close to 1,000 students we have, it would be a little bit over 200,000 for the town of Norfolk, for our public schools. That cost will help offset if we need to add teachers or staff to meet social distance requirements and class size requirements for a safe return. It could also be used to help offset transportation costs. It is not likely that that will cover all unexpected costs related to safe reopening of schools. We do have access to some additional funds from the town through a FEMA grant to cover the cost of personal protective gear. We're somewhat ahead of other communities. We've already ordered sufficient supplies for personal protective gear for the first 3 months of school, and we are getting those supplies in. So we're in pretty good shape with that, but those costs we can submit to the FEMA grant. The town also has some CARES funding, just over $1 million, that we may be able to access to offset some additional costs from transportation changes or other things. So there's a few new sources, which improves the picture for us significantly. And that will kind of head into the budget. Anybody have any questions before I get into the budget situation or where we are now on reopening? Jen's waiting, so.
I do, Ingrid. Taking my notes. Am I correct in understanding? I know originally when they came out with a preliminary DESI about class sizes, they had a certain number, and what I'm hearing now is they're just saying, just make sure there's no 10 in a group anymore. They're just making sure you socially. Okay, what about double checking? Go ahead.
They've changed that because the class sizes and classroom space are different in every district. Yep. So if you say 10 students and you're in a small classroom, they may not be able to be appropriately distanced in a room like the cafeteria, you need a bit more. So they're going by the guidelines of a minimum of 3 feet between student desks, and then districts can determine how many students they fit with those parameters.
And I'm assuming the group will decide, because we all know that, especially in the younger elementary grades, there are no desks. It's usually little tables, those sorts of things. I'm sure you guys will figure that stuff. And also just something from a parent point of view, just from things that I've heard about the mask guidelines, I think it would be great if the committee definitely comes out with very clear guidelines on what's expected out of teachers and students, because I think there's a misconception out there that kids are going to be in masks 7 hours a day. And I am assuming that's just not, it's really going to be when they're close and contact and whatnot. But I know that's something I'm just asking for the group to really come out with letting parents know clearly what the kids are going to be, when they'll be wearing a mask and whatnot.
That actually, we're expecting further clarification on the mask guidelines, and that's going to be prescribed by DESI. That won't be local decision.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
For further review and input from the medical community on that, and we are expecting to have very clear direction as to requirements for masks.
Okay, well, that's good to know it's coming from DESI. And then just some feedback about the remote learning plan is definitely, if we need to go back because of a surge, just having that ready on right away, that parents really understood, at the beginning that we were on the fly. But I think that moving forward, if we had to go back, some of the feedback was like, let's have it ready to go.
It'll be submitted in August and shared with the public by then.
Okay. And then my last question, I was just curious, does DESI, I know you have to put it on file. Are they going to give the district feedback, or are they just going to just say, check, you did it?
I believe that they are going to review and approve the plans.
Okay.
We are waiting for further guidance on the process and how we're going to submit them and what the process is going to be. We have not received that yet, but the implication we got from the commissioners meeting this morning was that DESI will be reviewing and approving plans, and that they have a team of staff available to consult with districts to support the planning process if needed. Yep.
Okay. And I'm excited to hear about the grants, and I hope they turn around quickly for everybody.
We all do. Good.
I have a question.
Yes. Medora.
Oh, sorry, Thomas. You want to
Go
go
ahead.
first? Okay.
No, go ahead.
So I read the guidelines when we got them earlier today, and I honestly probably didn't read them as closely as I should have, so I'm not sure if this was answered there. If it was, I apologize. But the three models that could exist, is the position of DESI that it's going to be for every district in the state? If there's a spike in cases in the state, everybody goes to hybrid or everybody goes to fully remote at the simultaneously? You see what I'm saying?
Not necessarily as if it's a local town that has a spike in cases, or if you have an individual student or staff member that's diagnosed in your public health nurse. So it could be an individual district that has.
Okay, and that's more reasonable. I appreciate that. I think the only feedback I've heard kind of from folks who've looked at this in the short time it's been available is there's some concern being voiced about, I think there are any number of folks who are teachers in town who teach out of district, and then vice versa, teachers who come into Norfolk and have kids who are in another district, and there's concern about how, if we are in, if we're fully open and their home district has gone remote or hybrid, sort of what would be happening. And I think I understand it's a ginormous can of worms or snakes, however you want to look at it. Like it's a lot, but that's just, I've already been hearing about that from more than one source at this point. So it's just something to consider.
I believe that the DESI indicated that the primary goal is for all kids to come back in a full return. And the only districts that would be beginning in a hybrid situation would be districts that do not have the space or capacity to accommodate that. Higher class sizes, but DESI is also reserving additional funds to support districts with leasing spaces or portable units, things like that. So I believe in our area that the vast majority of districts are going back with a full return with additional safety protocol in place. And then the hybrid model would only happen if there's a spike in cases locally, or if there's a change in research data regarding the COVID pandemic. And that could happen either locally or on a broader scale. So depending on the data. So it is hard. I know that was one of the challenges that we was really struggling with when we were first looking at a hybrid model. With some teachers talking about like 1 week on, 1 week off. Others are talking about splitting, 2 days a week, and it's really challenging for teachers with students that are in multiple districts. So definitely a concern. Any other questions on the DESI guidance?
Yeah, I had a couple things. So kind of building on Medora's point, is there a specific mechanism that triggers this? Like, what is this? I guess I'd like to know, what is the actual process? Like, say something happened, you mentioned like a staff member or student, whatever the case is. Is this something that's solely on a district level? We then implement this plan, or is it in conjunction with DESI?
So it would be, and they haven't really gone over the process, but what happened in the past that I think would drive this would be if you had a local case, a student or a staff member, DESI has in the past asked you to consult with your local board of health and your local public health nurse for advice and direction on as to whether or not you need the COVID. So it would have to do with whether the person was in contact with many people, how many people might have been exposed. So that kind of decision for a local case would probably be made at the local level in consult with the board of health and public health nurse.
Okay, that's just good for the public to know that. And then you had mentioned, and I assume the answer is no, but these various plans that we're putting out there, it was in August. Is there a date yet?
We don't have a date. DESI said that they would expect them to be submitted sometime in early August, but I think they haven't given us a date because the guidance that we've received is not complete yet. They've only issued preliminary guidance. We expect in the next couple of weeks to get guidance on. That's my dog. I'm sorry. I'll text somebody to take that away. Sorry. I've lost my train of thought.
No, I think you answered my question. I guess what I was getting at is are they going to be able to get? You said these plans aren't just going to be rubber stamped. I mean, that's going to be a little difficult to they're going to get
as quickly as
hundreds upon hundreds of plans and be able to kind of go through that and figure out what's the best course. That seems very challenging.
They're going to give us a pretty comprehensive template for submitting our plans, and then they will be reviewed. But yeah, they haven't given us a date because we're still waiting for guidance on special subject areas. So art, music, physical education, what those could look like and what the parameters are around them. For transportation guidance, how many students can be on a bus if they're wearing masks, that guidance is still to come. So we can't really submit plans until we have all of the required guidance from DESE. So they are saying early August, but they haven't set a date yet. Yeah.
It's going to be a challenge. And then I think Jen might have mentioned this in terms of the, I thought I read something there was a build-in for mask breaks of some sort. Is there some guidance already in there for that? Okay.
The initial guidance that they've given us is that students in kindergarten and first grade would be encouraged to wear masks, but not required. Teachers in those grades would be required to wear more protective gear because they're working with students that wouldn't be wearing masks. Students in grade 2 and above, they are expecting to wear masks, especially when they are traveling through the hallways or when they're riding a bus. Are currently indicating students would wear masks through most of the day, but with scheduled mask breaks. But that is still being looked at by the medical team, and we're waiting for further guidance on that. How frequent mask breaks should be, when they would be, what the parameters of those would be. So we're still waiting.
Yeah, because I can imagine that's going to be a pretty popular question, like Jen was mentioning. I mean, there's a lot of people asking. I mean, expecting a smaller child, even third grade, to keep a mask on for that long is not feasible.
Yeah, and we're waiting to find out if they're sufficiently socially distanced, would they be required to keep them on while they're at their desk or just when they get up. So all of that guidance is still coming.
Okay, that's it for me.
Anyone else? Okay.
I'm sorry, one more. Will the question of SAC is going to be dealt with in conjunction with the reopening committee? Is that because I know that'll be a hot topic as well?
It's going to be separate from the reopening committee, but I am actually meeting with Davis next week to go over the guidance and take a look at what implications the recent release of guidance from DESE has for before and after school programming. And she also is part of a group of before and after care directors. So they are working together to look at what the implications and what possible ways they could structure that program would be. So that will be happening as well. And we'll have that guidance out by early August as well.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I do actually have a question, and I haven't read them in depth, but how would they decide going from, I know the goal is to have everybody in the building, but how would they decide, say there is a spike in cases, how do they decide whether to go to the hybrid approach or whether to go completely remote learning? And what's the threshold for each of those phases or each of those decisions?
They haven't shared that out yet, and my guess would be that if there is a significant, and this is just a guess based on what's happened in the past, but if there was a significant spike in cases across the Commonwealth, like we're seeing in some states right now, the Department of Ed and the governor would make that decision. Okay. So like they did in the last closure, the governor might say all schools are going to be remote learning for the next period of time or a hybrid model. If there's small spikes in certain communities, then the Department of Ed may make a different call in conjunction with the governor's office.
Okay.
Government.
That makes sense. Okay. They have lots to decide. But no, that makes sense. It's just got to be hard to figure out what that threshold is. And then how do you bring it back? If they, or is it just they make that decision and it stays that way for the remainder of the year?
Yeah. So when we first closed, we made a local decision because of a local spike in cases, and there wasn't clear guidance from the governor's office in the state yet. So the initial closure in Norfolk preceded the governor's announcement. We closed on a Thursday, and the following Monday, the state did the closure. But since that time, the governor's office has a huge team of public health experts and epidemiologists and infectious disease specialists that consult with them, and they are the ones that are determining what the threshold would be that would trigger different kinds of those. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, as far as the budget, because these two things are tied together, for our new committee members, we had a public hearing on our proposed school budget back in early March. I believe it was March 3rd. It was all pre-COVID. So we presented a recommended budget for next year in March. The school committee voted to approve that budget. A week later, COVID pandemic began, and we had to close schools Over the few months that followed that, there was significant declines in local revenue expectations. So state aid was dropping. They were predicting a 10% decrease in state aid to all communities. Local receipts, home sales, other taxes were coming in low. So the revenue picture for the town changed dramatically over the course of the COVID closure. We were asked by the select board, in order to balance the budget, knowing that the revenue picture had changed and there was going to be a significant shortfall in local revenues. Schools were asked, and all departments were asked, to make reductions to assume and account for that 10% decrease in state aid, as well as decreases in other revenue sources. We were asked to cut about $285,000. We were able to do that successfully without any reduction in force or without any teacher positions being cut. We, in order to close that gap, we cut significant amounts of supplies from all of the district buildings. We reduced funding for curriculum. We did, and we decided that we would not be filling two of the new positions that we had proposed. We had proposed a new full-time assistant principal for both buildings and a increase to our team chair position, and we agreed that we would hold those positions at this time. So we were able to close that gap. Additionally, over the last few weeks, probably the last 5 weeks, the district has incurred significant unexpected and unbudgeted costs in special education. We are still working on determining the impact of programming and staffing and transportation of those new costs. And we also had shifting guidelines from the state. Up until the Wednesday prior to closure, the state was really leaning towards that hybrid model. Half your kids in 1 week, half your kids in the next week. That data picture changed dramatically late in the game, and we were advised that we had to hold back on planning until we got new guidance, and the guidance was changing. So up until about 2 weeks ago, we weren't even considering a full return of students. We also, the guidance was delayed coming out, and without the reopening guidance, districts had no way of really estimating what the potential costs associated with reopening would be and what funding would be available to support that. In addition to that, the Norfolk town meeting was delayed, so we don't yet have an approved certified budget. So given all of those things, the district did have to issue reduction in force notices to many of our non-professional staff teachers. And a non-professional status teacher is just a teacher that is in their first 3 years of teaching within the district. Notices were provided because of the statutory and contract deadline of June 15th, and you have to provide teachers with notice by that date, no later than that date, of a potential reduction in or other position may be reduced. The goal has from the beginning been to, once we could build the budget picture, had a better estimate of state revenue, had a sense of what the reopening costs might be, to be able to recall as many of the teaching positions as possible. So there's a few things that we're still waiting on. One is the town meeting has been moved until Saturday. We are hoping at town meeting that our budget with the reductions requested by the select board will be approved and certified, so we will actually have an operating budget. We also have a warrant article on the town meeting agenda, and that's to establish a special education stabilization fund. Special education costs vary for districts every year, and they're really very unpredictable. It's the most fluid part of our budget. And by establishing a stabilization fund, it gives us, it's almost like an insurance policy for the district. It gives us funding that we can access if we have a new student move into the district, or we have to send a child to an out-of-district placement that was unexpected, so that we can respond to those costs in a timely and efficient manner. It would significantly help the district for next year. As I said, we have some significant unbudgeted costs that have occurred. We would not access the stabilization fund immediately because with hiring, with substitutes, there may be district savings that we see over the fall. So we would try to mitigate the additional costs with any savings that we might see, but we would have the ability to go back to that fund if we aren't able to close the gap or meet those costs. And just for the public, that fund is not an automatic withdrawal. It has significant oversight and governance. So If the district is not able to balance the new costs that we have, through savings in any other areas, and we need to go access that fund, we would have to come to the school committee first. We would have to propose withdrawing 100,000 and transferring it to our operating budget. The school committee would have to vote on that, and then that would also have to go to the select board for a second vote before any budget transfers could be made. However, that's a much cleaner and more efficient process than having to go back to a special town meeting in order to appropriate additional money to the school. So our hope is that on Saturday, those that are operating budget and the special ed stabilization fund will be passed. With the additional revenue that it appears that we'll be getting from the state, that will certainly help us as we estimate the cost for reopening, and will go a long way in helping us begin to be able to recall our teaching staff that we had to provide notice. So those are the things that are pending. And we look forward to town meeting. It is going to be Saturday now at 10 o'clock at the high school. Here it's going to be quite a hot day, and they're trying to get some tents and things out there for the public now. And after that time, we will be working with the reopening committee next week to start to unpack the guidance. What we don't have yet from the state is any parameters for what that additional funding will be what will be considered eligible costs, or the process for accessing the additional revenue. So we're still waiting on that, and that will also help us kind of estimate where we are in terms of the budget. Any questions on budget?
I do. I just want to clarify that the stabilization account would be for special ed purposes only, correct? This isn't like, hey, we want to hire a Spanish teacher, let's pull it out. I just want to make sure it's clear I understand. I want to make sure the public understands it's for special ed.
It only covers very restricted costs, additional staffing, transportation, out of district placement costs. So those big ticket items, special educational. So yeah, thanks for clarifying.
And just for the public knowledge, I mean, typically what would be a cost related to, let's say, an outplacement? Let's say the child has such significant needs, you need to, the lawyer said, you know, it gets judged that you have to send that child out, or that child needs a one-on-one bus ride. What this is for the public.
I can give you ballpark costs.
Yeah.
And students need out of district placements for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's for medical purposes.
Right.
But a private out of school placement is about $85,000, and the transportation costs that would accompany that are about $30,000. A collaborative placement is $56,000. Bus monitors from $20,000 to $25,000. So our a residential placement can be upwards of $150,000. So they're large budget items, and you know, in public education, we have the privilege of being able to educate every child, regardless of what kinds of programming needs that they may have. And we offer a large range of services within our district. We have very few students currently outplaced, but there are some students that we're not able to, and that's when we would look at that sort of circumstance. Also, sometimes if the student moves into the district from another community that has been outplaced, we immediately absorb some of those costs. Although because we have very strong programs, we're often able to bring kids back to the general classroom in public school.
It's a legal mandate. Sometimes we have no choice in it, is what I just want to get out there to the public, and that it happens more often than not. It's like you said, it's a privilege to educate everybody, and these are some associated costs.
Yep. And it's fluid. You know, children's needs change over time. We have to be able to respond. But again, the stabilization fund allows us to respond first internally with the district if we have the capacity, because we have savings anywhere to meet those needs. But it's a much more efficient way to be able to access funds, and it's just better for everybody. We don't have to go to the town because we have a placement that identifies one particular student family that are driving costs. It's a much better process. So
it makes sense to me, and it has to be paid. It's not like it's a choice that we can say no. So. Thank you.
I think too, just for the edification of Sarah and Shannon and anybody else who's excitedly watching this meeting right now, or later, is the fact that the fund is it's not funded from the town. It's not a separate budget line item that the town is putting into. We're funding this from savings from this year's school budget.
Yeah.
So it's basically a self-funded insurance program for future costs. And if you extrapolate out what's going on from a budget standpoint across the state right now, we've had about a quarter of lost revenue that's resulting in all of this happening. As COVID continues across the course of the next year, there's going to be more lost revenue from the state. So the town is going to continue to have to deal with that challenge. This will give them more flexibility in the overall operating budget because we won't need that one line item in our budget from the town. We will have this money set aside in reserve. And so every year we carry what, Ingrid, about $80,000 to $100,000 in the budget for potential cost?
In the past, we have carried a placeholder for an out of.
75.
It's been about, the last few years, we've just carried a collaborative placeholder, 50 plus the 20,000 for transportation.
For the, right, so the aggregate of everything we sort of earmark for this in the event that we need it, we would return it to the town, it gets converted to free cash, and then the next year we just have it in our budget again. This way the town has access to that line item, basically, and we still have money set aside to pay the legally required fees that we may have to pay in the event that something comes up. So we have funded it ourselves. There's no other town department is seeing a deficit as a result of this in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, they're going to have access to more funds and flexibility in the budget moving forward when they're probably going to need it over the next, 1 to 3 years, realistically speaking, due to the shortfalls we're going to keep seeing from the state.
Yeah, and additionally for the district, in next year's budget, we do not have a placeholder. We had to reduce that given increases that we're seeing in enrollment, and that we had to add 2 teaching positions. So as a result of that, the town did not have the revenue to support a placeholder, which I expect to be the case in future years too. So this does give them that protection of having that reserve account that we are funding to self-start.
I want to throw out one little thing there. So tomorrow I'm going to put something out on the community page, which I'm generally loath to do so, but I don't have a choice. And basically what I'm going to do is just sort of condense what we've just discussed in sort of almost bullet points of keep it very simple of what our aim is for Saturday of passing the budget as is laid out in the warrant. Yes, we need more money for any number of things, but it complicates it greatly if we introduce other factors. And then the importance of this particular item that we just discussed. There are still all kinds of questions. I'm sure Jen and Medora can tell you the same thing, and this is sort of Shannon and Sarah's benefit. If you haven't already gotten this, there's a lot of confusion about this issue. There's a lot of information out there. There's almost too much information out there. So that's the intent of me wading into this is to put it out there and see if that helps, because candidly, I understand why it was done, but I have concerns as to with the meeting being moved from Wednesday to Saturday. It's the beginning of July 4th week. Attendance is of a concern of mine, and this is absolutely tantamount to our exit. We have to have this happen in both cases. So the importance of this, I've got to get out there. So even if we have some folks sitting on the fence that may not know about it, this may be our final chance. And then just as an aside, and this is more for Sarah and Shannon's benefit, but don't comment on it. You can like it, I guess, if you'd like. But that could be construed as a public meeting. If we comment on it, the 3 of us do, it could form a quorum. So be very mindful of that. You'll have all kinds of fun training later about that. But just for the moment in time, that's probably the biggest thing. So I'll try to get that out by mid-morning tomorrow in hopes maybe we get a couple of fence sitters that go our way, or maybe some people become a little more open-minded to the subject. So I guess we'll see.
And Thomas, I can jump in and clarify 2 things that I know have been in advisory board meetings and questions from the public around the budget. The first was there was a question as to whether or not the advisory board should be putting forward a higher budget and not as significant cuts in local revenue that the select board had. So as I said, the state was estimating a 10% shortfall in state revenue. They were expecting a decrease in excise tax and other local receipts. The advisory board initially had a position of considering putting forward a higher budget, and then if the shortfall happened in the fall, making cuts and reductions at that time. That doesn't work well in a full situation because we can't hire people and then let them go in September. So we would have to not fill those positions until we knew the funding came in. Other people have asked about trying to appropriate a higher budget at town meeting. And we've not asked for that primarily because at this point, if they only have two choices. If they were to appropriate more funding for the schools, it either has to come from cuts to other departments, police, fire, and those are positions, and we don't know yet what we need, or it would have to come from stabilization, from the town stabilization fund, which, sorry, here comes my dog, reduces the town's bond rate, which we would need for any future building project. But as Medora said, we're expecting multiple years of depleted funds. And that stabilization fund will have to help us. And next year is going to be a harder budget year for us because we managed some of those cuts through savings we had for helping COVID. We won't have that going into next year. So I fully expect that we're going to need the town to access stabilization funds from the rainy day to support us next year to maintaining the programs that we have. So our position has been that the shortfall should really come from the state right now. It shouldn't come from local revenue that's depleted, it should come from the state. So we've been putting a lot of time and effort into advocating for full funding for public education at the state level, which is the resolution you signed today. And I think you saw evidence of that advocacy. And also the Mass Teachers Association has been really supporting that advocacy for state funding. And that is what you saw in the guidance that came out. So additional funding is coming at the state level because local towns are hitting a significant budget shortfall. So that's why we're pushing at the state level. We have also said to the town, if once the state numbers come in, we still can't balance the budget, we do have the capacity to go back to the town to a September fall meeting, special town meeting, and request additional funding at that time. So we are asking the town at this time to appropriate the budget as it's reflected in the warrant and pass the stabilization fund, waiting on state aid with the ability to go back in the policy. Any questions?
I have a budget question, and it's sort of a tack on. Rentham had their meeting already, correct?
Yes.
And did they vote the budget for KP?
They did.
So that just as a point of reference, Sarah and Shannon, 2 of the 3 towns have to vote a budget for KP. Plainville is going to a 1/12 budget. They're not having their town meeting before the close of the fiscal year. So we have to pass the budget as proposed to get, our budget is my primary concern, but they need to have things passed so that they have any budget whatsoever. They will have no budget reality, as I understand it, if 2 out of the 3 towns haven't passed a budget before the end of June. So
yeah,
it's doubly important.
Their budget, they won't have a certified operating budget until Plainville's town meeting, which is mid-August, which puts them in a very difficult situation in terms of recalling their teachers because they won't have an appropriated budget.
That's helpful. And thank you, Medora. That was helpful, your earlier explanation too. I think in Tom, you said it too, on social media, I feel like things are, there's a lot of noise out there. So it was helpful, Medora, to hear your very concise explanation of it. And I'm hopeful that the public will hear that. And Thomas, as you said, hopefully some people will. There are people that are on the fence that perhaps aren't educated and don't really know the details of it. Hopefully they'll get those bullet points and get the salient points and make a wise decision.
And
I would helpful from both of you. Thank you.
I have the opportunity at town meeting to do a brief presentation on school budget. So I will be highlighting a lot of those things in the presentation, and then we have the opportunity to respond to any public questions.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you.
And there is, for the stabilization fund as well, just as a point of reference, I think there are some people who just get concerned about oversight of that much money being in a special fund and it's earmarked for schools. So from the oversight standpoint, obviously we have the 2 vote layers of we vote to utilize the funds and access the funds, and then the select board has to approve that use as well. In addition to that, we cannot in perpetuity just keep shoveling money into that fund. There's a statutory cap on how much money you can keep in that fund at any one point. So it's not
It's not
like
infinite.
yeah, it's not, we're not going to be sitting there with little, bags full of money kind of, for the next 10 years or something. I think it's like 2% of the school's operating budget. So it's
Oh, it could be
relative to the amount of money that's passing through the district. It's a relatively small amount, but it is, if it is fully funded, it is more than sufficient to defray the kind of pain associated with those unanticipated costs that otherwise might result in having to cut other line items.
That makes sense.
That's all I have. I think we're moving on to committee reports.
Well, I guess we don't have anything for King Philip, as our King Philip rep has started about 38 minutes ago, so that doesn't work. And then Jen, I don't know if you had anything policy-wide, or I didn't think so either.
We have not. No, we have not met. So
okay.
Stay
We look
tuned.
forward to the next one then.
Mhm.
So then so this would just be a vote for Medora, Jen, and myself as far as approving the minutes of the June 2nd meeting. So do we have a motion to accept the meeting minutes of June 2nd?
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of June 2nd.
I will second that motion. Second.
Assuming no further discussion between the three of us, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and let's see here. And then we are looking at August 18th. Does that work for everyone's calendar as far as the next meeting?
Sure.
Yes.
I think so.
Okay. Just with all the fun that's been going on, I don't totally dismiss the possibility we might have to do something prior to then. But we'll at least plan for that and put that as a placeholder for the time being. So,
okay. Yeah.
Hopefully not, but we'll see. And let me see. All right. Well, then I think. All right. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a
I will
second?
second Jennifer Wynn's motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
And again, welcome Shannon and Sarah. We look forward to working with you both.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. All right.
Have a great night.
Bye.
Everybody have a good weekend right now.
Take care. Bye.